Barbie, Barbie, Barbie. Who would have thought that a film about the father of the atomic bomb would be less contentious than the one about a plastic female toy? But hey, this is the world we live in now. Every few months a movie comes out that divides an audience. On one side of the aisle, there are those who will praise a movie no matter what, and that is a hill they will die on. On the other end of the spectrum, there are those who will tell you it's the worst thing to happen since, well, pick your horrendous world event. But what if I told you they were both right and wrong? I'm not sitting on the fence here, but I felt both sides of the argument as I sat and watched the movie unfold. When Barbie, played by the sensational Margot Robbie, begins to have thoughts of mortality while living her perfect existence in plastic Barbie land, she then embarks on a journey into the outside world with Ken, played by the charismatic Ryan Gosling, to address the root of her problems. Obviously, it makes sense that the plot of Barbie, the movie, is based on the toy's life, the existential crisis that Barbie's titular toy character experiences. However, the voyage of self-discovery is really surprising in the direction Ken takes. While some may perceive this movie as the writers and director taking a sledgehammer to Ken or men in general, it's Ken, not Barbie, who has the real character arc throughout it. While Barbie learns what it's like to be a woman and a human while living in the real world, she encounters amazement, empathy, and emotions for the first time, as well as being mocked, bullied, and incarcerated. The real world is a frightening place for Barbie. On the other hand, Ken appears to be in heaven, if not actually. It is his first exposure to a society where Ken's men command the majority of power. Barbie interacts with women and learns about the joys of crying and the horrors of sexual harassment, whereas Ken interacts with men and learns about the patriarchy, which he brings back to Barbieland and has the other Kens overturn, take over and rename Kendom. Ken, who has lived his entire life believing that the only time he can enjoy himself is when Barbie acknowledges him, learns all of a sudden that there are guys in charge of everything. He discovers a place where the Kens are not treated as inferior people, but rather as the ones who make the decisions and shape the society. For Ken, the word patriarchy is a game changer. Ken starts to comprehend the mainstays of the ordinary masculine experience, like Sylvester Stallone dressed stylishly, sports, movies, and horses. Horses, horses, horses. He returns to Barbieland with his research, convinced that he has discovered how things should be done. The overall goal of Ken's story is not to knock down men. Instead, it's intended to reflect the path that many men take after becoming aware of male-dominated culture themselves. Men mature, and as they become more conscious of their environment, they transition from a naive innocence to the belief that they should act a specific way or have a certain interest, because this is the way, this is how men should act. On a surface level, none of this is particularly offensive. There are some funny quips about gender roles and so forth. However, as the movie slides into the real world, these observations about gender roles in society come to the forefront with the subtleness of a fox in a henhouse. Barbie is slapped on the arse by a man as soon as she steps foot in the real world, and a few seconds later, a group of construction workers catcall her. I don't have a problem with a movie making social commentary, but doing it in such a blatant way simply serves to further embolden the people you're already targeting. What's more, it's just plain lazy writing. Look, I had fun for the most part when the story was in Barbieland, but in the real world, it's just a in-your-face social commentary. Don't we go to summer blockbuster movies for escapism? I'm not trying to play down the issues women face on a daily basis, the unjust, brutal, and frequently egregious disadvantages women have experienced throughout history of being the subject of several films such as Rosemary's Baby, The Stepford Wives, and the heavy-handed Don't Worry Darling.
Here you can live the life you deserve.
But the Barbie movie, it just feels so out of place for a movie about, well, pink. Anyway, Barbie returns from the real world to discover that Ken, whom she had assumed to be a friend, had suddenly moved into her house and replaced all of its furnishings and decor, indoctrinated and subjected her pals, and turned into a grade A dick. He treats her like a lower being, but he still wants her to be his girlfriend and share his unrequited love. It's kind of weird that these independent, powerful women suddenly turn on a dime, but whatever. However, the important point to remember is that Ken's increased authority in the patriarchy does not improve his mood. His issues are not resolved by it, he doesn't win the girl with it, it simply indicates that even if he is now alone, he is still miserable and empty inside.
There is no just Ken.
Barbie serves as a reminder that sexism affects both men and women. While they might get to rule the world or whatever, leaning into ideas of toxic masculinity causes them to miss out on the meaningful emotional connections, strong friendships with other men and women, empathy, a good cry. The same gender roles that are supposed to reinforce their superiority also repress them. Young males are told that they can't be who they want to be if it doesn't fit into an archaic conceptions of masculinity. Also suffer from the patriarchy's negative effect. When the division between men men and women is removed, who are the men under the patriarchy? By using a beach blonde himbo, the film asks men to put themselves in women's shoes rather than criticizing males. If that treatment makes you angry, perhaps consider how it would feel to endure it every day. Ken ends up playing a bit of a villain in the movie when he brings lessons about the patriarchy from the real world back to Barbie Land. Even then, though, the film is more about making Ken become the stereotypical angry internet voice when they discuss Barbie, someone who is dissatisfied with the world and seeks to overcompensate with extreme display of hypermasculinity. Ken complains about the Barbies, i.e. women, because it is the only way he can express his sexual resentment, and he steps up a system to control them in order to feel in control of their life. Again, kind of weird that these independent, powerful women suddenly turn on a dime, but whatever. The movie does not despise men or Ken. Instead, the film presents a situation in which Gosling's Ken and all the other men in Barbie Land experience the same level of oppression, control, and condescension that women do in the real world. Barbie Land is a matriarchy where, to paraphrase Will Ferrell's character as the CEO of Mattel, no one has ever cared about Ken. Rather than being about patriarchy, Barbie ignores Ken's character in the first act, and all he needs to do to get her attention in Barbie Land is wait until she decides she wants to spend time with him. For Barbie, every day is a great day, explains the narrator. For Ken, it is not a great day unless Barbie looks at him. At the end of the day, Barbie isn't really about men at all, despite the fact that the latter point of the movie's plot moves in that direction. Barbie is a girl-orientated toy that aims to encourage girls to dream big. Before women could use credit cards, she had a dream house. The doll's creator, Ruth Handler, stated, "My entire Barbie idea was that the little girl could be anything she wanted to be through the doll." Barbie has always stood for that idea that women have options. With this, you'd think the movie would end with a positive message. The real-world mother, Gloria, makes a speech towards the end of the movie about how women can be anything: a mum, housewife, lawyer, and a doctor. In the end, it's their decision, and society shouldn't tell them what to do. That is the point that ought to have been highlighted throughout, but oh boy, I was wrong, and I'll get to that in a moment. Barbie is now the highest grossing opening weekend for a film by a female filmmaker, surpassing 2019's Captain Marvel. If anything, Barbie does try to send a good message about guys and manhood. In my opinion, it was considerate and aware of how boys and men seeing it would feel, and it intended to convey to them a message as strong as Barbie's. It was a kind but not necessary gesture. I'd also advise men to take a mental break while watching this movie, as women are very rarely permitted to engage in collective cultural enjoyment. According to Post-Track, a woman made up 65% of the attendance at the historic Barbie opening, and 40% ticket buyers were under the age of 25. With all that said, the ending did rub me the wrong way with its messaging. Of course, Barbie Land is a parable for the actual world in which males dominate, but where women, Barbies, rule. Sad to say, Barbie is supposed to be our main character who undergoes some sort of emotional journey and emerges from it a better person. But by the end of the film's conclusion, Barbie Land is once again under her control. Should the movie's takeaway be that women and men are equal, and that we should all work towards building a society that is more accepting and respectable by being more sensitive to one another's feelings? But no, Barbies regain their position as Barbie Land's dominating rulers, leaving Kens with nothing but scraps once again. And this can be summed up when a Barbie says, "We should allow one Ken onto the Supreme Court," when another Barbie scoffs and replies, "Nothing too high a station, maybe a circuit court judge." What a progressive message to end on. We acknowledge that we have treated you unfairly, but will continue to do so. Oh, and shout out to my boy Alan, played by Michael Cera.
Hi, Barbie.
Oh, hi, Alan.
Not a single scene you won't get a laugh from when he's on screen. At the end of the day, should you go watch Barbie? Absolutely. It's a fun time with plenty of laughs. However, when the preaching starts, just focus on the bright, fun film behind it. Oh, and Margot. Well, that's enough rambling for one day.